Cub falls down an old well. The town's newborn had the only key to rescue. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The small village of Oakvale nestled against the edge of Whisper Woods, where ancient trees stood guard over secrets as old as time itself. The village had changed little over the centuries, with its cobblestone streets and quaint cottages that seemed to grow from the earth like mushrooms after rain. At the center of the village square stood an old stone well, its weathered rim covered by a heavy iron grate secured with a peculiar lock. Many had forgotten why the well was sealed so securely, the reason lost to time and fading memories. In a small cottage adorned with climbing roses at the edge of the village, Nora and Samuel Wright had just welcomed their first child into the world. The baby girl, whom they named Willow, arrived as the first stars of evening appeared in the sky. The village midwife, Eleanor, noticed something extraordinary as she cleaned the newborn. Clutched in Willow's tiny fist was an unusual key, bronze and weathered, with intricate patterns resembling leaves and flowing water etched into its surface. "In all my years," Eleanor whispered, her wrinkled hands trembling slightly, "I've never seen such a thing. The child was born holding this key." Samuel tried gently to take it from his daughter's grasp, but her tiny fingers remained firmly closed around it, as if she knew its importance before anyone else could understand. "Let her keep it," Nora said softly, cradling Willow to her chest. "If she brought it into this world with her, it must mean something." Samuel nodded, though his eyes reflected confusion as he studied the key from a distance, noting how it seemed to catch the light in ways that ordinary metal should not. That same evening, deep within Whisper Woods, a mother bear guided her curious cub through the underbrush, teaching him the ways of forest life. The cub, with russet fur that glowed copper in the dappled sunlight, possessed an adventurous spirit that often led him astray. His mother called to him with low grunts whenever he wandered too far, and he would bound back to her side, only to be distracted moments later by a darting squirrel or fluttering leaf. As twilight descended on the forest, painting the trees in shades of purple and gold, the cub spotted a glowing firefly hovering just beyond his reach. While his mother foraged for berries, he followed the mesmerizing light, his paws silent on the forest floor covered with fallen leaves and soft moss. The firefly led him deeper through the woods, past ancient oaks and whispering pines, until the trees began to thin and the scent of humans grew stronger. The curious cub paused at the forest's edge, where wildflowers gave way to tall grass that bordered the outskirts of Oakvale. The firefly hovered above a strange, circular stone structure, nearly hidden by climbing ivy and wild roses. Cautiously the cub approached, his nose twitching at the unfamiliar scents that clung to the ancient stones. Reaching the well, the cub stood on his hind legs, placing his front paws on the edge to peer at the firefly that now rested on the rusted grate. The stones, worn smooth by centuries of hands and ropes, shifted beneath his weight. For one terrifying moment, time seemed to slow as the cub felt the ground crumble beneath him. He scrambled desperately, claws scraping against moss and stone, seeking purchase where none could be found. With a frightened cry that echoed through the forest, the cub plunged into darkness, tumbling down the forgotten well. His fall ended in a splash as he landed in a pool of cold water at the bottom, deep enough to break his fall, but shallow enough that he could stand. Soaked and terrified, he cried out for his mother, his whimpers echoing up the narrow stone shaft toward a distant circle of fading daylight. 10-year-old Lily Morgan was gathering wildflowers near the forest's edge when she heard the strange cries. Dropping her basket, she followed the sound until she discovered the old well, where desperate whimpering rose from the darkness below. Lily knelt beside the well, her heart pounding as she peered through the rusted grate. "Is someone down there?" she called, her voice trembling. A pitiful whine answered her, followed by splashing sounds. Squinting into the shadows, Lily caught a glimpse of movement, the faint outline of a small animal thrashing in the water below. "Oh, no," she gasped, realizing what had happened. "Don't worry, I'll get help." Lily ran toward the village, her braids flying behind her as she called out for help. "Someone, help!" An animal fell into the old well. Her cries drew villagers from their homes and shops, curiosity and concern bringing them together as they followed her back to the well. Among them was Old Thomas, the village historian whose grandfather had once been the keeper of the well before it was sealed. His joints creaked with age as he knelt beside the grate, peering into the darkness. "I can see it," he confirmed, his voice grave. "A bear cub, by the looks of it. Poor creature must have wandered too far from its mother." "We need to open the grate and get it out," said Mason, the village blacksmith, his strong hands already testing the lock. "The mother bear will come looking soon, and we don't want her finding us gathered around her trapped cub. That lock hasn't been opened in 50 years, Old Thomas said, shaking his head. "My grandfather sealed it when a child nearly drowned. The key was meant to be passed to the next keeper, but there never was one." The gathered villagers exchanged worried glances as the cub's cries grew weaker, its energy fading as fear and cold water sapped its strength. "Can't we break the lock?" asked Jacob, a young farmer with strong arms and a kind heart. "This iron is old but strong," Mason replied after examining it. "Breaking it would take time we don't have, and the noise might attract the mother bear." As the villagers debated what to do, Lily noticed a strange sound beyond the cub's whimpers, a deep, rumbling growl that seemed to shake the very ground. She turned slowly, her blood freezing in her veins as she spotted the massive figure emerging from the forest edge. The mother bear stood on her hind legs, her powerful form silhouetted against the darkening sky, eyes fixed on the gathering of humans around the well where her cub's cries echoed. "Nobody move," whispered Old Thomas, his voice barely audible as fear gripped the crowd. "Back away slowly." But the mother bear dropped to all fours, releasing a roar that seemed to split the air itself as she charged toward them. The villagers scattered in panic, all except Lily, who remained frozen beside the well, too terrified to run as the massive creature barreled toward her. Just as the bear seemed certain to reach her, it skidded to a halt, its massive head swinging toward the well as another cry rose from the depths. The cub's whimper seemed to reach something primal in the mother, and she approached the grate, paws scratching frantically at the iron bars, trying to reach her trapped baby. "She knows," Lily whispered, her fear giving way to wonder as she watched the mother bear's desperate attempts to free her cub. "She's trying to save him." From the safety of nearby trees and buildings, the villagers watched the heartbreaking scene. A mother unable to reach her child, separated by human invention she couldn't hope to understand. The bear's powerful claws scraped uselessly against the iron grate, her frustrated roars giving way to mournful sounds as darkness continued to fall. "We have to help," Lily said firmly, looking to the adults hiding nearby. "The cub will die down there, and the mother won't leave without him." "But the key is lost," Mason reminded her, his voice tight with tension, "and none of us can get close with her guarding the well." A new voice joined the conversation. Eleanor, the midwife, who had arrived breathless from delivering news to Nora and Samuel. "Perhaps not lost," she said cryptically, just waiting for the right moment to be found again. Eleanor described the strange key that baby Willow had been born clutching, and a murmur ran through the crowd. Old Thomas pushed forward, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Describe it again," he demanded, his voice urgent. Eleanor detailed the bronze key with its etchings of leaves and flowing water, and the old man's face paled. "That's it," he whispered. "The well key my grandfather spoke of, but how could an infant—" His voice trailed off as the cub's cries grew fainter, the situation becoming dire with each passing minute. The mother bear continued to pace around the well, occasionally rising on her hind legs to peer down at her trapped baby, her distress evident in every movement of her massive body. "I'll go speak to the Wrights," Eleanor said firmly. "They must bring the key." "But the bear," several voices protested at once. "We'll find a way," Lily insisted, her young face set with determination that belied her years. "We have to try." Eleanor hurried back to the Wright cottage, where she found Nora cradling Willow, who slept peacefully, the mysterious key still clutched in her tiny hand. When Eleanor explained the situation, Samuel's face paled with fear. "You want us to bring our newborn child near a distraught mother bear? Have you lost your mind?" "Not the child," Eleanor clarified quickly. "Just the key. Though," she hesitated. "I've tried to take it from her grasp earlier, and she wouldn't release it. It's as if she knows it's meant for something important." Nora and Samuel exchanged troubled glances, torn between concern for the trapped cub and fear for their daughter's safety. As if sensing their conflict, baby Willow stirred in her sleep, her tiny fingers relaxing for the first time since her birth. The key slipped from her grasp, landing softly on the blanket. "It's a sign," Nora whispered, carefully picking up the key. "She's letting it go because it's needed now." Samuel took the key gingerly, studying its ancient design. "I'll go," he decided. "But I won't risk our child, or you, Nora. Stay here with Willow." With the key clutched tightly in his hand, Samuel followed Eleanor back to the well, where the situation had grown even more tense. The mother bear had become increasingly agitated as her cub's cries weakened, her massive paws digging at the earth around the well as if trying to find another way to reach her baby. Old Thomas approached Samuel, his eyes fixed on the key. "It's the same," he confirmed in a whisper. "But how do we get past the mother to use it?" Jacob, the young farmer, stepped forward with a plan. "We need to distract her, just long enough for someone to unlock the grate." He held up a sack of fresh honey from his hives. "Bears can't resist honey, and this might draw her attention long enough." The villagers nodded in nervous agreement, and Jacob carefully moved to the edge of the clearing, opposite from the well. With a deep breath, he opened the sack, allowing the sweet scent of honey to fill the air. The mother bear's head swung in his direction, her sensitive nose twitching as she detected the tempting aroma. Jacob slowly poured some honey onto a fallen log, then backed away, his heart pounding as the massive creature hesitated, torn between the offered treat and her trapped cub. After what seemed like an eternity, the bear lumbered toward the honey, though she kept glancing back at the well, unwilling to abandon her baby completely. "Now," old Thomas whispered urgently. Samuel darted forward, key in hand, approaching the well from the opposite side. His hands trembled as he fitted the ancient key into the rusted lock, praying it would still work after all these years. For a moment, the key stuck, refusing to turn, and Samuel felt despair wash over him. Then, as if guided by unseen hands, the key shifted slightly, finding its proper position. With a loud click that caused the mother bear to whirl around with a roar, the lock opened and the grate swung free. Samuel scrambled back just as the mother bear charged toward the well, her powerful form moving with surprising speed. But instead of attacking, The bear skidded to a halt at the well's edge, nosing the open grate aside before letting out a mournful call to her cub. Weak, splashing sounds came from below as the cub responded to his mother's voice. "She can't reach him," Lily observed, her voice tight with worry. "The well is too deep and the sides are too steep." Mason stepped forward, a coil of rope in his hands. "We need to lower someone down," he said firmly. "Someone small enough to fit through the opening and light enough for us to pull back up easily." All eyes turned to Lily, whose slender frame made her the obvious choice. The girl swallowed hard but nodded her agreement, her concern for the cub outweighing her fear. "I'll do it," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The challenge now was keeping the mother bear from interfering. Old Thomas approached slowly, speaking in a low, soothing voice that seemed to capture the bear's attention. While no one believed she understood his words, something in his tone seemed to reach her, keeping her attention divided between him and the well. "My grandfather spoke to the forest creatures," he explained softly to the others. "He said they understand intention more than words." With the mother bear temporarily calmed, Mason secured the rope around Lily's waist and helped her position herself over the open well. The other villagers held onto the rope, ready to lower her into the darkness. "Be careful," Jacob warned as Lily began her descent. "The stones might be loose after all these years." Lily nodded, her heart pounding as she was slowly lowered into the cool dampness of the well. The walls were slick with moss, and the air grew colder with each foot of her descent. From above, she could hear the mother bear's anxious grunts and the reassuring murmur of old Thomas's voice. At last, her feet touched the shallow water at the bottom of the well. In the dim light filtering from above, she could make out the shivering form of the bear cub, pressed against the curved wall, its wet fur clinging to its small body. It whimpered as she approached, too exhausted and frightened to show aggression. "It's all right," Lily whispered, slowly extending her hand. "I'm here to help you." The cub regarded her warily, but didn't retreat as she gently wrapped her arms around its trembling body. It was heavier than she expected, solid muscle beneath the soaked fur, but manageable in her arms. "I've got him," she called up. "Pull us up." As the villagers began to haul on the rope, lifting Lily and her precious cargo toward the surface, a strange thing happened. The mother bear, who had been pacing anxiously nearby, suddenly went still, her eyes fixed on the well opening as if understanding that her cub was being rescued, not harmed. When Lily's head finally emerged from the well, the cub clutched safely against her chest. The mother bear let out a sound unlike any the villagers had heard before. Not a roar or a growl, but almost a purr, deep and rumbling, with what could only be described as relief. She approached cautiously as Mason helped Lily climb free of the well, setting her gently on the ground. Lily knelt, carefully placing the cub on the grass. For a moment it stayed beside her, too weak to move, its small body shivering from cold and fear. Then, with a gentle nudge from Lily's hand, it took a tentative step toward its mother. The reunion that followed brought tears to the eyes of even the most stoic villagers. The mother bear nuzzled her cub, licking its wet fur, examining it for injuries with surprising gentleness for such a powerful creature. The cub pressed against her warmth, its frightened whimpers giving way to sounds of contentment. What happened next would become the most discussed moment in Oakvale's history for generations to come. The mother bear, with her cub safely beside her, turned toward the gathered humans. Instead of charging or fleeing into the forest with her recovered baby, she rose slowly onto her hind legs, towering over them all. The villagers froze, fear returning as the massive creature stood before them, powerful enough to kill any one of them with a single swipe of her paw. But instead of attacking, the bear remained still, her dark eyes seeming to meet each person's gaze in turn, lingering longest on Lily and Samuel, who still clutched the ancient key in his hand. Then, in a gesture that defied explanation, the bear lowered her massive head in what could only be described as a boo, before dropping back to all fours and guiding her cub toward the safety of the forest. The villagers watched in stunned silence as the two bears disappeared among the trees, the last glimpse being the cub looking back once before following its mother into the shadows. No one spoke for several long moments, each person trying to process what they had witnessed. "She thanked us," Lily finally whispered, breaking the spell. "She understood we were helping her baby." Old Thomas nodded slowly, his weathered face solemn. "There are mysteries in this world beyond our understanding," he said. "Today we've witnessed one of them." As the excitement faded and the villagers began to disperse, discussing the extraordinary events in hushed, wondering tones, Samuel looked down at the key still clutched in his hand. The weight of it seemed different now, as if the metal itself had been changed by its role in the rescue. Eleanor approached him, her eyes shining with an emotion he couldn't name. "You should return that to its rightful owner," she said softly. Samuel nodded, understanding without words that she meant his daughter. As he walked home in the gathering dusk, the key seemed to warm in his palm, as if eager to return to the tiny hands that had brought it into the world. When he arrived at the cottage, he found Nora by the window, Willow awake and peaceful in her arms. "What happened?" Nora asked, her eyes searching his face for answers. "Did the key work?" "It did," Samuel replied, his voice filled with wonder as he recounted the extraordinary events at the well. "The cub is safe with its mother and the bear." He hesitated, still struggling to believe what he had seen. "The bear seemed to thank us before they left." He placed the key gently in Willow's open palm, watching in amazement as her tiny fingers closed around it once more, her eyes seeming to hold wisdom far beyond her hours of life. "I think this belongs to her," he said softly, "though I don't understand why or how." "Perhaps we're not meant to understand everything," Nora replied, looking down at their daughter with new wonder. "Perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain just that. Mysteries." That night, as Willow slept peacefully, the key clutched in her tiny fist, the villagers gathered in the town hall, where old Thomas shared a story his grandfather had told him long ago, a legend about the well and its special key. The well was not always just a source of water, the old man explained, his voice carrying to every corner of the hushed room. "My grandfather spoke of it as a bridge between worlds, our world and the world of nature. The key was forged from metal found deep in the earth, shaped by human hands but blessed by forest spirits. It was meant to be passed down through generations, always finding its way to the person who would use it when both the worlds needed to come together." "But how did it find its way to a newborn baby?" someone asked. Old Thomas smiled, his eyes twinkling. "That, my friends, is the greatest mystery of all. My grandfather said the key chooses its keeper, and sometimes the purest souls are the youngest among us." From that day forward, the well remained unlocked, though the heavy grate was kept closed to prevent accidents. Once a month, the villagers would gather to clean and maintain it, remembering the extraordinary day when a mother's love, a child's courage, and a newborn's mysterious gift had brought humans and nature together in an unexpected harmony. As for Willow, she grew into a curious and compassionate child, with a special affinity for the forest and its creatures. The key remained her most treasured possession, though, as she grew older, she would sometimes walk to the well alone, place her hand on the cool stones, and feel a connection to something larger than herself, as if the universe had chosen her before she was even born to be part of a story written in the stars. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind whispered through the trees at the forest's edge, villagers would glimpse a mother bear and her growing cub watching from the shadows, their presence a reminder of the day when barriers between worlds had momentarily fallen away. As spring turned to summer, the people of Oakvale noticed something strange happening in their village. Plants near the well began growing with unusual vigor. Vegetables in nearby gardens doubled in size, flowers bloomed with colors more vivid than ever before, and trees nearest the well seemed to whisper when no wind blew through their leaves. Children who drank from cups filled with well water claimed they could understand the birds' songs, if only for a few fleeting moments. Samuel noticed that the key, still clutched by Willow most days, sometimes glowed with a faint blue light in the darkness of night. When his daughter slept, he would gently examine the mysterious object, tracing its intricate patterns with his finger, feeling a strange energy emanating from the metal that both fascinated and unsettled him. One evening, as Willow lay sleeping in her cradle, the key began to pulse with light, matching the rhythm of her tiny heartbeat. Samuel called to Nora, and they watched in astonishment as the light grew stronger, casting eerie shadows across the walls of their cottage. Outside, an unusual fog gathered around their home, thick and swirling with shapes that seemed almost human before dissolving back into mist. "What's happening?" Nora whispered, clutching Samuel's arm as they stood over their daughter's cradle. Before he could answer, a soft knock sounded at their door. Samuel opened it to find old Thomas standing there, his eyes wide with urgency. "You need to come to the well," the old man said without preamble. "Something is happening." Leaving Willow in the care of Eleanor, who had also appeared at their doorstep as if summoned by some unseen force, Samuel and Nora followed old Thomas through the village. The fog parted before them and closed behind them like a living thing, guiding their path toward the old well. As they approached, they saw that the entire village had gathered there, drawn by some collective instinct none could explain. The well was glowing with the same blue light as the key, tendrils of luminescence spiraling up from its depths into the night sky. The iron grate stood open, though no one admitted to having unlocked it. "What does it mean?" Mason whispered, his strong hands trembling as he pointed to the forest's edge. There, emerging from the trees like shadows given form, came the mother bear and her cub, now considerably larger than when they had last seen him. Behind them walked other forest creatures, deer with magnificent antlers, foxes with bright, intelligent eyes, owls that perched on branches overlooking the gathering, and countless other animals that should have been enemies but now moved together in strange harmony. The villagers backed away in fear, but old Thomas stepped forward, his weathered face calm in the ghostly light. "Don't be afraid," he said, his voice carrying unusual strength for a man his age. "They aren't here to harm us." The mother bear approached the well, her cub following close behind. As they reached the ancient stones, the bear rose onto her hind legs and placed her massive paws on the well's edge, looking down into its depths with what seemed like reverence. The cub mimicked his mother's posture, and together they released a synchronized rumble that vibrated through the earth beneath the villagers' feet. From the forest came an answering sound, a chorus of animal calls that blended together in haunting harmony. The well's glow intensified, and from its depths rose a mist that took shape above the gathering, the form of an elderly man with kind eyes and a long beard, his transparent body composed of swirling blue light. "Grandfather," old Thomas gasped, falling to his knees. "It can't be." The spectral figure smiled and nodded, then spoke in a voice that seemed to bypass the ears, and resonate directly in the minds of all present. Long ago, the apparition began, this land was in balance. Humans and nature lived as one, each respecting the other's domain while sharing the bounty of the earth. This well was not merely a source of water, but a conduit between worlds, the world of humans and the spirit of the wild. The ghostly figure gestured toward the forest, where more animals had gathered, their eyes reflecting the well's blue glow. But fear and greed poisoned that balance. Humans began to see the forest as something to be conquered rather than cherished. They took more than they needed and gave nothing in return. The bear and her cub remained at the well's edge, seemingly understanding every word of the apparition's tale. The spectral man continued, his voice growing sad. As keeper of the well, I tried to maintain the balance, but when I passed from this world, no successor had been chosen. The key was lost, and with it, the connection between your world and the spirit of the wild began to fade. The apparition turned its gaze to Samuel and Nora. But now, a child has been born with the soul of a keeper. The spirits of the forest recognized her even before her birth, and entrusted her with the key that was thought lost forever. As if summoned by his words, Eleanor appeared at the edge of the gathering, baby Willow in her arms. The key in the infant's grasp was now glowing so brightly it illuminated Eleanor's astonished face. The old midwife stepped forward, presenting the child as if offering a precious gift to the assembly. The ghostly figure nodded with approval. This child was chosen before her first breath. The rescue of the bear cub was no accident. It was the first test to see if the village remembered the old ways of compassion and harmony. The mother bear lowered herself to all fours and approached Eleanor and Willow, causing gasps of fear from the villagers. But the massive creature simply sniffed gently at the baby, then touched her nose to the glowing key. A spark jumped between them, and the bear stepped back, seeming satisfied. The balance can be restored, the apparition continued, but it requires a choice. The child is too young to make this decision, so it falls to her parents and to the village as a whole. Samuel stepped forward, his voice steadier than he felt. What choice must we make? The ghostly figure gestured to the well. The well can remain as it is, a simple source of water, nothing more. The key will lose its power, becoming an ordinary object, and the connection between worlds will fade completely. Your lives will continue as before, unchanged. The apparition paused, his luminous eyes scanning the faces of the villagers. Or the well can be restored to its true purpose as a bridge between worlds. The forest and the village will once again be connected, each influencing the other. Crops will flourish, illness will decline, and the animals will protect your boundaries from those who might wish you harm. But, the ghostly keeper warned, there is a price. The child must be taught the old ways. She must learn to listen to the forest and speak for it when necessary. And the village must pledge to live in balance with the wild, taking only what is needed and giving back in equal measure. A murmur ran through the crowd as the villagers contemplated this choice. Some looked fearful, others intrigued, but all recognized the significance of the moment. This was no small decision. It would change the course of their village forever. "What happens to Willow if we accept?" Nora asked, her voice breaking with maternal concern. "Will she be taken from us?" The apparition's expression softened. "She will remain your daughter, raised with your love and guided by your wisdom. But she will also belong to the forest in spirit, learning its secrets and carrying its voice. It is both a great honor and a solemn responsibility." Samuel and Nora exchanged a long look, an entire conversation passing between them without words. Then, together, they approached Eleanor and their daughter. Willow was awake, her infant eyes focused on the glowing apparition with unusual intensity for one so young. "The choice should be hers," Samuel said finally, looking down at his daughter, "even if she cannot speak it yet." As if understanding his words, Willow raised her tiny hand, the key glowing brilliantly in her grasp. She reached toward the well, the key seeming to pull her arm in that direction. Then, in a motion that drew gasps from all present, the key floated from her hand, hovering in the air between the child and the well. "She has chosen," the apparition said, a smile spreading across his luminous face. "As I knew she would." The key slowly moved toward the well, hovering over its center before plunging into the depths. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a single heartbeat amplified 1,000-fold, a pulse of blue light erupted from the well, expanding outward in a ring that passed through everyone present before reaching the forest's edge and beyond. Where the light touched, change followed. The grass beneath their feet grew greener. Flowers bloomed instantly despite the late hour, and the trees at the forest edge seemed to straighten and strengthen, their leaves rustling with new vitality. The animals watching from the woods seemed to bow in unison, acknowledging the restoration of an ancient pact. The apparition began to fade, his form dispersing like mist in morning sunlight. "Remember," his voice echoed as he disappeared, "the balance must be maintained. Teach the child well. She will need all of you, just as you will need her." As the ghostly figure vanished completely, the blue light receded back into the well, though a faint glow remained, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. The mother bear and her cub approached Willow once more, the massive creature inclining her head in what could only be described as a bow, before turning and leading the procession of animals back into the forest. The villagers stood in stunned silence, trying to comprehend what they had witnessed. Old Thomas broke the spell, his voice cracking with emotion. "My grandfather spoke true," he said. "All these years I thought they were just stories." Eleanor approached Samuel and Nora, Willow still cradled in her arms. The baby was awake but calm, her eyes reflecting the fading blue light of the well. "The key," Eleanor said, opening Willow's tiny hand to show her empty palm. "It's gone." "No," old Thomas corrected gently, approaching to look at the child. "Not gone. Watch." As they observed, a small mark appeared on Willow's palm, an intricate pattern that matched the etchings on the key, but rendered in what looked like luminous blue ink just beneath her skin. The mark glowed briefly, then faded to a barely visible outline. "The key is part of her now," old Thomas explained, "as it should be for a keeper of the well." In the days that followed, the village of Oakvale began to change. The gardens produced harvests of unprecedented abundance. The forest creatures no longer fled from human presence but watched with curious eyes from the safety of the trees. Children reported dreams of running with wolves and flying with eagles, waking with knowledge of the woods they had never been taught. And Willow, though still an infant, showed signs that she was no ordinary child. Birds would flock to her window, singing as if telling her stories. Plants leaned toward her as she passed, as if reaching for her touch. And sometimes, when she slept, her parents would find small gifts beside her cradle, perfect acorns, unusual feathers, flowers that shouldn't bloom in that season, tokens from the forest acknowledging its chosen keeper. As summer waned and autumn approached, a new challenge arose. Travelers from neighboring villages brought news of logging operations moving toward the region, wealthy merchants from the city having purchased rights to harvest timber from the surrounding forests. The villagers gathered at the town hall, concern etched on their faces as they debated what to do. They had pledged to protect the balance between their world and the wild, but how could they stand against the wealth and influence of city merchants? "We could appeal to the regional governor," Mason suggested, though his tone lacked conviction. "Explain the importance of preserving the forest." "The governor cares only for taxes and trade," Jacob replied bitterly. "He won't turn away good coin for the sake of trees and animals." As the debate grew heated, the door to the town hall swung open, though no human hand had pushed it. A cool breeze, carrying the scent of pine and earth, swirled through the room, and with it came the soft sound of padding feet. The villagers fell silent as the mother bear entered, her cub close behind. Rather than panic at the appearance of the massive predators in their meeting place, the villagers made way, some even bowing slightly as the bears moved to the center of the room. The mother bear rose onto her hind legs, towering over everyone present, and released a rumbling growl that somehow translated itself into understanding in the minds of all who heard it. She spoke of territories and boundaries, of ancient pacts between humans and forest that predated written history. She told of times when humans with axes had come before, and how the forest had protected those who protected it. Her message was clear. The village would not stand alone if they honored their pledge. When the bear finished and dropped back to all fours, old Thomas stepped forward. "I believe I understand," he said, looking around at his fellow villagers. "We are being asked to trust in the pact we've made, to stand firm against the loggers and trust that the forest will support us in turn." The bears turned and left as silently as they had arrived, leaving the villagers to contemplate this new development. That night, as Samuel and Nora discussed the meeting in hushed tones near Willow's cradle, they noticed the mark on their daughter's palm glowing softly in the darkness. "What does it mean?" Nora whispered, gently tracing the luminous pattern with her finger. "I think she's listening," Samuel replied, watching as the light pulsed in time with their daughter's steady breathing. "Not just to us, but to the forest as well." The first scouts from the logging operation arrived a week later, hard-faced men on horseback with parchments bearing official seals. They spoke of progress and prosperity, offering coin for any village men willing to join their workforce. The villagers listened politely but declined, citing their contentment with their current livelihoods. The scouts left, clearly displeased but unable to force cooperation. "They'll be back," old Thomas predicted grimly, with more men and less patience. That night, a thick fog descended upon Oakvale, unusual for the season and impenetrable to the eye. The villagers, warned by an inexplicable sense of foreboding, gathered their children close and secured their doors and windows. From the forest came sounds like none they had heard before, not quite animal calls, not quite the creaking of trees, but something that seemed to blend both into an eerie chorus that raised the hair on the backs of their necks. At dawn, when the fog finally lifted, the scouts' camp at the edge of the forest was empty. Their equipment remained, tents, supplies, even their horses still tethered and unharmed, but not a single man could be found. The only clues to their fate were strange tracks in the mud, some resembling massive bear paws, others like no animal the villagers had ever seen, all leading deeper into the forest before vanishing entirely. Word spread quickly through the region. The logging merchants sent more men to investigate, who themselves disappeared without trace after camping near the forest edge. Tales of an enchanted wood where men vanished into thin air grew with each telling, embellished by travelers and strengthened by the genuine fear of those who had glimpsed the edge of Whisper Woods and felt a presence watching from among the trees. Within a month, the logging plans were abandoned. No amount of potential profit could persuade men to venture near what was now being called the Devouring Forest, in hushed tones throughout the region. The governor himself issued a proclamation declaring the area unsuitable for commercial use due to unusual natural hazards, a face-saving measure that nonetheless achieved the desired result. In Oakvale, life settled into a new rhythm, one that honored the pact between village and forest. Children were taught to take only what was needed from the woods and to leave offerings in return, the first fruits of harvest, handcrafted tokens, or simply songs sung at the forest edge with gratitude in their hearts. Willow grew from infant to toddler, displaying an uncanny connection to the natural world. She spoke to animals as if conversing with friends, often laughing at replies no one else could hear. Plants flourished at her touch, and when she cried during the rare occasions of childhood illness, the mark on her palm would glow, and forest herbs with healing properties would be found on the cottage doorstep by morning. On her 3rd birthday, a celebration was held at the well, which had become the heart of village life once more. As twilight descended, Willow broke away from the festivities and toddled to the forest edge, where the mother bear and her now adolescent cub waited in the shadows. Without fear, the child approached the massive creatures, reaching up to touch the mother's muzzle with her small hand, the mark on her palm glowing brightly at the contact. Samuel and Nora watched from a respectful distance, having learned to trust in the bond their daughter shared with the forest. "Do you ever regret our choice?" Nora asked softly, leaning against her husband's shoulder. Samuel watched as his daughter giggled at something the bear seemed to communicate, her innocent laughter carrying across the clearing. "Never," he replied without hesitation. "She belongs to us and to the forest, and we belong to something greater than ourselves. What more could we wish for her?" As darkness fell completely, fireflies emerged from the woods in unprecedented numbers, swirling around Willow and the bears in patterns too precise to be random. Spirals and whirls that matched the pattern on the child's palm, now glowing like a beacon in the night. The villagers watched in wonder as the lights formed a bridge between their world and the forest, a visible manifestation of the connection they now cherished. In the years that followed, Oakvale became known throughout the region as a place of unusual harmony and prosperity. Its harvests never failed. Illness rarely took hold, and travelers reported feeling a sense of peace upon entering the village boundaries. Few outside the community understood the true source of their good fortune, and the villagers were content to keep their secret. Willow grew into a young woman of remarkable wisdom and kindness, assuming the mantle of well-keeper with grace and dedication. Under her guidance, the bond between village and forest strengthened with each passing season. Children born in Oakvale seemed to inherit a portion of her gift, able to sense the moods of the forest and hear whispers of the wild in their dreams. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind carries secrets between the trees, visitors to Oakvale might glimpse a young woman sitting at the edge of Whisper Woods, a massive bear at her side, their silhouettes outlined against the setting sun. Keeper and guardian, human and wild, separate yet undeniably connected. For in Oakvale they had discovered the key to understanding had been with them all along, not in the metal that unlocked the well, but in the compassion that had opened their hearts to help a creature in need, regardless of the risk. That lesson, passed down through generations, proved far more valuable than any physical key could ever be. And if travelers report seeing strange blue lights dancing above the old stone well on certain nights, or hearing animal sounds that carry human words on the edge of understanding, the villagers simply smile and suggest that perhaps, in a world of endless wonders, there are some mysteries best left unexplained, but always, always cherished. The story of Oakvale spread far beyond its borders, carried by merchants and travelers who passed through the unusually prosperous village. Some dismissed the tales as mere folklore, while others were drawn to the community, sensing something special about the place where the forest and human settlement seemed to exist in perfect harmony. 7 years after the restoration of the well, as Willow blossomed into a curious 10-year-old with a wild spirit and knowing eyes, the village faced its greatest test yet. A terrible drought descended upon the region, the worst in living memory. Rivers shrank to trickles, crops withered in the fields, and forest fires burned in distant provinces, sending smoke to darken the horizon. Neighboring villages suffered terribly, their wells running dry and their livestock growing thin from lack of proper grazing. Yet in Oakvale, the gardens remained green, the well never emptied, and a subtle ring of vibrant growth encircled the forest edge, as if defining a boundary between the suffering lands beyond and the protected village within. As refugees from drought-stricken communities began appearing at the village borders, seeking water and food, the people of Oakvale faced a difficult decision. Their prosperity amid widespread suffering had not gone unnoticed, and with each passing day more desperate people arrived, drawn by rumors of a village untouched by drought. "We cannot turn them away," Lily, now a compassionate young woman, argued at a village gathering. "We have more than enough to share." "But for how long?" Jacob countered, his farmer's practicality showing through. "If we invite all who suffer to partake of our good fortune, we may soon find ourselves without enough for our own needs." The debate continued late into the night, with valid points raised on both sides. Some feared that sharing their resources might violate their pact with the forest, while others believed that compassion was at the very heart of that agreement. Through it all, Willow sat quietly beside old Thomas, now stooped with age but still respected for his wisdom, listening intently to every word. When all arguments had been exhausted, Willow stood, her small figure commanding immediate attention from the gathered villagers. The mark on her palm glowed faintly as she spoke, her voice carrying unusual weight for a child her age. "The forest does not hoard its gifts," she said simply. "Rain falls on every tree, not just the tallest. The sun shines on every leaf, not just the brightest. We were given abundance not to keep it for ourselves, but to share with those in need." Samuel and Nora exchanged proud glances as their daughter continued, articulating wisdom beyond her years. "I will speak with the forest," Willow promised. "We will find a way to help without breaking our pact." That night, under a moon so full it cast shadows like pale ghosts among the trees, Willow walked to the forest edge alone. The villagers watched from a distance as she sat cross-legged on the ground, her palm pressed to the earth, her eyes closed in concentration. The mark on her hand glowed brighter than they had ever seen, sending blue light spiraling up her arm and across her small face. For hours she remained motionless, communing with forces none but she could fully comprehend. Sometimes her expression would change. A frown, a smile, occasionally a nod, as if agreeing to unseen terms. When she finally rose and returned to the village, her eyes held a mixture of hope and solemnity. "The forest will extend its protection to those we shelter," she announced to the waiting villagers, "but only if they learn our ways. Each person we welcome must plant a tree, tend a garden, and take an oath to respect the balance between taking and giving." The solution was both elegant and appropriate. Refugees were welcomed into Oakvale with open arms, but each was taught the principles that guided the community's relationship with the natural world. What began as necessity soon became genuine understanding as newcomers witnessed firsthand the benefits of living in harmony with the forest. As summer gave way to autumn with still no rain in sight, Oakvale swelled with displaced families from throughout the region. Instead of straining their resources, however, the village experienced an unexpected phenomenon. The more they shared, the more abundance they seemed to receive in return. Gardens produced second and even third harvests. The well never ran dry, despite hundreds drawing from it daily, and hunting parties invariably returned with enough game to feed all who needed nourishment. The most remarkable change, however, came in the attitudes of those who had sought refuge. People who arrived desperate and frightened, caring only for their own survival, gradually opened their hearts to the wisdom Oakvale offered. They learned to listen to the forest, to take only what was needed, and to give back in equal measure. Children who had never before ventured beyond city walls discovered the joy of running barefoot through meadows and climbing trees that seemed to intentionally lower their branches for small hands to grasp. As the drought continued to ravage the surrounding lands, word of Oakvale's miracle spread further, eventually reaching the ears of the regional governor himself. Intrigued by tales of a village untouched by the disaster affecting his province, he decided to see this wonder with his own eyes. The governor's arrival caused quite a stir in Oakvale. His procession of uniformed guards and ornate carriages seemed gaudy and out of place against the simple beauty of the village. He was a corpulent man with small, calculating eyes and jeweled rings on every finger, the very picture of excess and indulgence. As the village elders, including Samuel and old Thomas, greeted the governor with appropriate respect, Willow watched from the shadows of a nearby tree, her expression wary. Something about this man troubled her, though she couldn't quite identify the source of her unease. The governor spoke grand words about resilience and community spirit, praising the village for its resourcefulness, while carefully avoiding any mention of the more mystical aspects of their good fortune. He requested a tour of Oakvale, particularly interested in the well that supposedly never ran dry despite the worst drought in generations. As the delegation approached the ancient well, Willow felt the mark on her palm burn with unusual intensity. She slipped away from her hiding place and ran to her father's side, tugging urgently at his sleeve. "He mustn't touch the well," she whispered, her eyes wide with concern. "His heart is full of greed. He doesn't seek to understand, he seeks to possess." Samuel nodded subtly, trusting his daughter's instincts without question. He positioned himself casually between the governor and the well, as old Thomas explained some of the structure's history, carefully editing the tale to exclude any mention of forest spirits or magical keys. The governor listened with thinly veiled impatience, his gaze continually returning to the well itself. "Most fascinating," he interrupted eventually. "But I'm more interested in how this single well provides water for an entire village and refugees besides, when wells throughout the province have run dry." Before anyone could respond, he stepped forward, pushing past Samuel to run his bejeweled hand along the well's ancient stones. "There must be an underground spring of unusual strength," he mused, leaning over to peer into the depths, a resource that could prove invaluable if properly managed. As his fingers touched the well's edge, a strange hush fell over the village. The birds stopped singing. The wind died completely, and even the refugees gathered nearby fell silent, sensing something momentous about to occur. Willow gasped, clutching her palm as the mark flared with painful brightness. From the forest came a sound like thunder, though the sky remained clear. The ground trembled slightly, and the water in the well, visible to all who peered down its throat, began to recede before their eyes, sinking lower and lower until nothing but dry stone remained. The governor stumbled back, his face pale with shock. "What trickery is this?" he demanded, looking accusingly at the village elders. Old Thomas stepped forward, his aged face solemn. "No trickery, Your Excellency. The well gives freely to those who respect its gifts. It withholds from those who would exploit it." Anger replaced the governor's surprise. "Nonsense. Wells don't choose who drinks from them. There's some mechanism here, some clever deception. He turned to his guards. Search the village. Find whatever device they're using to control the water flow. As the guards moved to obey, a low growl emerged from the forest edge. The mother bear, now gray around her muzzle but no less imposing, stood watching the proceedings, her grown son at her side. Other animals joined them, wolves, deer, foxes, even birds of prey circling overhead, a united front of wild creatures presenting themselves in full view of the governor and his men. The guards halted, hands moving uncertainly to their weapons as they looked to their leader for direction. The governor himself seemed rooted to the spot, his florid face draining of color as he confronted something beyond his understanding or control. Willow stepped forward, the mark on her palm glowing visibly even in daylight. Though only 10 years old, she carried herself with the dignity of one far older as she addressed the governor. "The water will return when you leave," she said simply. "Oakvale isn't meant for your tax collectors or your ambitions. This place exists in balance, and that balance must be maintained." Something in the child's calm certainty seemed to unnerve the governor more than the gathering of wild animals. He looked from Willow to the well, then to the forest edge where more creatures continued to emerge, then back to the child with the glowing hand. "What are you people?" he whispered, fear evident in his voice. "Just people," Samuel answered, moving to stand beside his daughter. "People who learn to listen rather than command, to live with the forest rather than conquer it." The governor seemed to struggle internally for a moment, ambition warring with fear. Finally, self-preservation won out. "We're leaving," he announced to his guards, his voice higher than usual. "These people clearly wish to manage their own affairs, and the province has more pressing concerns than one eccentric village." As suddenly as he had arrived, the governor departed, his procession moving with unusual haste back toward the main road. The moment his carriage passed beyond the village boundary, the well bubbled back to life, water rising once more to its usual level as if nothing had happened. The gathered villagers and refugees released a collective breath, many turning to Willow with expressions of wonder and gratitude. The child seemed embarrassed by the attention, rubbing her palm where the mark had already faded back to its usual faint outline. "The forest protected us," she said simply when asked what had happened, "as it always will, so long as we protect it in return." In the weeks that followed, a remarkable change came over the region. Clouds gathered for the first time in months, bringing gentle rains that soaked the parched earth without causing floods or damage. The drought began to ease, allowing refugees to return to their homes with new knowledge and perspective gained from their time in Oakvale. Many chose to stay, however, having found something in the village that they couldn't bear to leave behind. Not just prosperity, but purpose and connection. They built new homes at the village edge, planted gardens and trees, and embraced the pact with the forest wholeheartedly. Oakvale grew, but it grew in harmony with the natural world rather than at its expense. As for the governor, he never again set foot in the village, though occasionally he would send observers disguised as ordinary travelers to report on the community's activities. These spies invariably found themselves welcomed warmly, taught the ways of the village, and sent home with nothing to report but stories of remarkably friendly people with unusual reverence for the forest. Several never reported back at all, having decided to make new lives in Oakvale rather than return to the governor's service. On Willow's 11th birthday, as the village celebrated with music and dancing around the well, old Thomas took her aside, his gnarled hands holding a small wooden box worn smooth with age. "It's time you had this," he said, opening the box to reveal an ancient leather-bound book, its pages yellow with age. "What is it?" Willow asked, running her fingers gently over the cracked cover. "My grandfather's journal," the old man replied. "The first keeper of the well in written memory. He recorded everything he learned about the balance between our world and the wild. It belongs to you now." Willow accepted the gift with appropriate solemnity, understanding its true value. That night, after the celebration ended, she sat alone by candlelight, carefully turning the fragile pages. The journal was filled with observations, drawings of plants and animals, accounts of conversations with forest spirits, and instructions for rituals to maintain the bond between human and wild. On the final page was a simple message that brought tears to Willow's eyes. To the keeper who reads these words, "You were chosen because your heart sees no boundaries between yourself and the natural world. Trust this connection. It will guide you when all else fails." As she closed the book, Willow felt the mark on her palm warm comfortingly, as if acknowledging her place in a long line of keepers stretching back beyond memory. Outside her window, a nightingale began to sing, its melody carrying a message only she could understand, a promise of partnership between the village and the forest for generations to come. And so the legacy of Oakvale continued, growing and evolving as the years passed, but always rooted in that fateful day when a bear cub fell down an old well, and a newborn child held the key to more than just a rescue, the key to remembering humanity's place in the greater tapestry of life. In the grand scheme of existence, Oakvale was but a small thread in that tapestry, yet it glowed with unusual brightness. A reminder that when we reach across the divide between human and wild with compassion rather than conquest, we unlock not just wells or gates, but possibilities that flourish like seeds in fertile soil, growing into something far greater than their humble beginnings. For the true magic was never in the key or the well, or even the forest itself, but in the hearts of those who chose connection over separation, compassion over fear, and balance over dominion. A lesson as old as humanity, yet forever new with each generation that discovers it anew, like a precious key waiting to unlock the door to a more harmonious world.